I want you to look at two gardens side by side. Same plot of earth. Same seeds planted the same week in the same soil. Same sun, same rain, same Lancaster County summer bearing down on both of them. One garden, by the end of July, looks like a catalog photograph. Tomatoes fat and clean, squash sprawling across the ground without a bite taken out of a single leaf, cabbage heads tight and unblemished. The other garden tells a different story. Aphids on the underside of every pepper leaf, ants running trails straight up the stems, cutworms in the soil at night, toppling seedlings by morning. Squash bugs clustered so thick along the vine that the whole thing collapses by mid-August. The gardener who owns that second plot has tried everything. He spent $63 last season on bottles and sprays and granules from the garden center. Spectricide, Ortho, the big jug with the hose attachment. He reapplied every 3 weeks like the label said. And still, by September, his yield was maybe a third of what it should have been. What is the difference between those two gardens? I am going to tell you. And when I do, you are going to feel a little bit of something. Because the answer has been sitting in your laundry room or your pantry shelf for less than $2 a box. It is not a bottle of blue powder from the garden center. It is not a synthetic pyrethroid in a bright orange jug. It is not a subscription service or a monthly delivery from some company with a toll-free number. It is a white mineral powder that was first registered as a pesticide in the United States in 1948 that has been used for over 100 years and that most gardeners never think to use because nobody in the garden industry has any reason to tell them about it. My name is Elmer. My family has worked the same ground in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania for 4 generations. My grandfather never went to a garden center. His grandfather never went to a garden center. They grew food on this same piece of earth year after year without spending a dime on pest control. I grew up watching how they did it, not reading about it, watching. And when I started to compare what they knew against what the modern garden industry sells, the shape of the thing became very clear to me. I want you to sit with this, because what I am going to show you today is a complete system. 5 steps, each one simple, each one cheap or free. And when you put them together, the pest pressure on your garden changes. Not immediately, not overnight for every problem, but by mid-season, the kind of pest damage that has been costing you yield and costing you money starts to disappear. I will tell you exactly what to do, how much to use, when to apply it, and what mistakes will ruin the whole thing. I will also tell you who profits from you not knowing this. Not to make you angry, just so you understand the shape of the thing. Esther found the information on the Amish home savings system, which we have linked in the description below. That book covers far more ground than I can get through in one sitting. But let us start here. The principle that the modern gardener has entirely backwards is this. You are not fighting the pest. You are managing the environment the pest needs to survive. Every bottle at the garden center is designed to kill the pest that is already there. That is a reactive approach. It treats the symptom after the symptom has arrived. What my grandfather understood, and what the pest control industry has no financial interest in you understanding, is that a healthy garden with the right mineral balance and the right physical barriers does not produce the conditions pests need to thrive. The ant colony does not colonize a garden that gives them nothing to farm. The aphid does not establish on a plant that is not under stress. The cutworm does not find its footing in soil that is properly conditioned. This does not mean pests never appear. It means that when you manage the environment correctly, the pest population cannot build to the level where it destroys your crop. That is the difference between those two gardens I described. The gardener with the $63 spray bill is reacting. The gardener with the clean, unblemished tomatoes is managing conditions. And the foundation of that condition management, in our system, is a mineral that costs less than $2 for enough to treat a 500 square foot garden for an entire season. Borax, sodium tetraborate, a naturally occurring mineral that comes out of the ground, is mined primarily in California and Turkey, and has been sold in the United States under the 20 Mule Team label since 1891. You can find a 65-ounce box at Walmart for around $5, and for garden use you will go through maybe 1 box across an entire growing season. That works out to somewhere between $1 and $2 per application depending on your garden size. Compare that to a bottle of spectricide triazicide concentrate at $22, which the manufacturer recommends applying up to 6 times per season, and you are looking at over $130 for the season just for that one product. The home and garden pesticide market in the United States was valued at $4.5 billion in 2024. The industry is growing at over 4% per year. That is not because the products work so well that more people keep buying more of them. That is because the products create repeat customers. A product that keeps pests away permanently at $2 a box from your laundry aisle is not a business model anyone with a distribution deal and a marketing budget is going to lead with. This is not a conspiracy. Nobody had to sit in a back room and coordinate this. The system simply pays better to sell something that needs to be reapplied every 3 weeks than to teach a gardener to fix the conditions that attract pests in the first place. Now let me show you how the Borax system actually works. Step 1 is what I call the perimeter line. This is the first and most important application, and it is where most people who have tried borax in the garden have gone wrong. The mistake they make is applying borax directly to their plants, directly to their soil in concentrated amounts, or using it without understanding what it actually does and does not do. Borax is a mineral that, when ingested by insects with exoskeletons, disrupts their digestive system and dehydrates them from the inside. It also damages their outer shell on contact. For ants specifically, which are the primary vector for aphid infestations in home gardens, borax works as a slow-acting bait. The ant carries it back to the colony and shares it, which is why it works on the whole nest and not just the workers you see. The key word there is slow-acting. If you use too much borax in a bait, the ant dies before it gets home, and you have killed one ant. Use the right concentration, and you have ended a colony. The perimeter line application works like this. Take 1.5 tablespoons of 20 Mule Team borax and dissolve it in 1 cup of very warm water. Then stir in 1 tablespoon of sugar or honey, or if you have it, a tablespoon of corn syrup. The sugar is the attractant. The borax is what the ant carries home. Dip cotton balls in this solution and place them at intervals of about 6 feet around the outside border of your garden beds. You can also soak small pieces of cardboard. Keep them out of direct rain or they lose potency. Refresh them every 5 to 7 days. The first time I showed this to a neighbor here in Lancaster County who had been fighting an ant problem for 3 seasons straight, she called me 2 weeks later. The colony was gone. It did not cost her anything she did not already have in the house. Now here is the honest warning Elmer always gives. Borax at high concentrations kills plants. It is used as a selective herbicide for certain invasive weeds. The concentration in the bait stations I just described is low enough that it will not harm your garden plants as long as you do not pour the bait solution directly onto the soil repeatedly in the same spot. Cotton balls placed at the perimeter, refreshed weekly, are safe. Pouring a cup of borax solution into your raised bed every week is not safe. The margin is real, and it matters. Step 2 is the foliar spray for soft-bodied insects. Aphids, mites, thrips, whitefly. These are the pests that colonize the underside of leaves and can take a tomato or pepper plant from productive to destroyed in 3 weeks. The National Pest Management Association reported that 67% of homeowners encounter insect problems in their gardens each season. Most of them reach for a spray bottle of pyrethroid. What that spray does is kill what it contacts and leave a residue that breaks down within days to weeks. What borax does, in a diluted foliar application, is different. A solution of 1 tablespoon of borax dissolved in 1 gallon of water, applied as a foliar spray to the undersides of leaves, coats the leaf surface in a thin film of boron. Soft-bodied insects cannot tolerate direct boron contact. It damages their outer membrane and desiccates them. More importantly, it makes the leaf surface inhospitable for the eggs they lay. You are not just killing what is there, you are breaking the reproductive cycle. Apply this spray in the early morning or in the early evening. Never in full midday sun, because the mineral concentrates on the leaf as the water evaporates and can cause minor leaf tip burn if the plant is heat stressed. Apply once a week for 3 weeks at the first sign of infestation, then drop to once every 2 weeks as a maintenance application. For tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and squash, this approach works well. Do not apply this foliar solution to beans or peas. Boron is toxic to legumes at concentrations that would barely affect a tomato plant. That is one of those plant-specific realities that the instructions on a general pesticide bottle never tell you. Different plants have different sensitivities. Know what you are spraying. Step 3 is soil health, and what my grandfather understood about boron deficiency that most modern gardeners have never considered. Here is something that almost nobody talks about. 85% of the United States has what is classified as hard water. Hard water is high in calcium and magnesium. High calcium in the soil, when it builds up over years of watering with hard water or over applying calcium-heavy lime, ties up boron and makes it unavailable to plants. Research from permaculture forums and agricultural extension offices confirms that the fertile plains from Texas north into Canada, soils that a century ago had naturally occurring boron levels as high as 3 to 4 parts per million, now test at less than 1 part per million in many areas after 100 years of conventional farming and soil mismanagement. Boron-deficient plants are stressed plants. Stressed plants signal their stress in ways that insects can detect. This is not metaphorical. Aphids and other sap-feeding insects locate host plants partly through chemical signals that stressed, nutrient-deficient plants emit. A plant with adequate boron produces stronger cell walls, completes its reproductive cycle more efficiently, and emits a different chemical profile than a boron-deficient plant. The deficiency shows up as dead or brown leaf tips, hollow or cracked stems in broccoli and cauliflower, dark centers in beet and turnip roots, and fruit that does not set properly. If your squash plants flower but never set fruit, that can be a boron problem. If your broccoli stems are hollow when you cut them, that is almost certainly a boron problem. 1 tablespoon of 20 mule team borax, dissolved in a gallon of water, applied as a soil drench to approximately 100 square feet of garden bed, provides the boron correction that most of these soils need. Do this once at the beginning of the season, not twice, not every month, once. The same caution applies here as with the foliar spray. Borax at excess will harm plants. The tablespoon per gallon per 100 square feet measure is the safe and effective rate. Write it down. That is steps 1 through 3. The perimeter bait for ants. The foliar spray for soft-bodied insects. The soil drench for boron correction and plant stress reduction. But there is one more thing, and this is the one most folks get wrong, even when they know the rest. Step 4 is the tool sanitation protocol, and I want to tell you why it matters more than most people think. My grandfather had a system for his tools that I did not fully understand until I was an adult. At the end of every working week in the garden, he soaked the blades of every pruner, every dibber, every soil knife in a bucket of borax water. 1 cup of borax to a gallon of water. He let them soak for 10 minutes, then rinsed them and dried them. I asked him once why he did this. He said that pests follow information, that what you moved from one plant to the next on an unwashed blade told the next plant things it did not need to know. He was talking about fungal spores, bacterial film, insect eggs, and the residue of stressed plant tissue. He did not use those words because he did not need to. He just knew that a clean tool was a tool that did not carry trouble from row to row. This is not folklore. The scientific mechanism is straightforward. Aphid eggs, spider mite eggs, fungal spores, and the bacteria that cause blight and canker all survive on metal surfaces between uses. A dirty pruner run through an aphid-infested tomato plant and then used to stake a healthy one is a direct vector for infestation. The borax solution does 3 things at once. It kills residual insect eggs and soft-bodied organisms on contact. It acts as a mild fungicide that suppresses mold and bacteria on the metal surface. And it leaves a thin mineral residue that is hostile to the next insect that walks across the blade. This costs nothing beyond a box of borax and 10 minutes on a Friday afternoon, and it breaks the transmission chain between your most vulnerable plants. Step 5 is what I call the broadcast barrier, and this is the step that most modern gardeners do not take because it sounds old-fashioned and because it is not sold in a bottle. On a dry morning, before the season's first major pest pressure, take dry borax powder and lay a thin line of it along the outer edge of your garden beds, not inside the beds, along the outer perimeter, between the garden edge and the lawn or the path. Dry borax on the soil surface is a physical and chemical barrier that crawling insects, including slugs, earwigs, ants, and certain beetles, will not cross willingly. Slugs die on contact with dry borax. Earwigs avoid it. Ants will route around a dry borax line when they can find another path, which is why the bait stations inside that perimeter become so effective. The ants that are already established inside the garden boundary are drawn to the sugar bait. The ants that have not yet crossed cannot. The broadcast barrier does not last through rain. Reapply after any significant rainfall or about every 2 weeks throughout the season. Use about a 1/4 cup per 10 linear feet of garden edge. That is dry powder applied as a thin line, not poured in a pile. A pile does nothing. A thin, consistent line is what works. Now I want to tell you about Esther's discovery. My wife Esther has been keeping the household accounts for our family for 30-some years. She is thorough the way I am thorough about the garden, which is to say she does not let a number pass without understanding where it came from. A couple years back, she started tracking what we spent on the garden versus what we took out of it in food value. Not just the borax and the seeds. Everything. The fuel for the tiller, the tools we replaced, the seedlings we bought at the garden center for the tomato varieties we do not start from seed. And she tracked what we would have paid at the farmer's market for the same produce. The difference was something she called the Amish home savings system, and it applies to the garden the same way it applies to the rest of the household budget. The link to the full system is in the description below. What she found is that the average home gardener in the United States spends between $250 and $400 per season on pest control, fertilizer, and garden amendments combined. Our total for the same size plot runs under $30. The difference is not magic. It is knowledge of what the land actually needs versus what the industry has convinced most people the land needs. Now let me tell you who profits from you not knowing about the borax system. I am not saying anyone is dishonest. I am saying that the direction the money flows tells you where the information does not go. The home and garden pesticide industry in the United States was worth $4.5 billion in 2024. It is projected to reach $6.5 billion by 2034. The leading brands, Spectracide, Ortho, Scott's, Miracle-Gro, SC Johnson, are not small operations. A 20-pound bag of Spectracide triazicide granules from Home Depot runs about $30 and covers 25,000 square feet at the standard application rate. The label recommends up to 6 applications per season. If you have a medium-sized suburban lot with a garden and a lawn, you might use 2 bags per application. That is $60 per application, 6 times per year, for a total of $360 on that one product alone. And here is the part that should make you pause. Pyrethroids, which are the active ingredient in most of these products, including the bifenthrin in Ortho Home Defense and the gamma-cyhalothrin in Spectracide, do not improve the soil. They do not make the garden environment less hospitable to pests long term. They kill what is present at the time of application. 3 weeks later, when the residue has broken down, new insects move in from the surrounding area and the cycle begins again. The product itself does not create conditions that reduce the need for the product. In fact, repeated pyrethroid applications have been documented to reduce populations of beneficial insects, including parasitic wasps and ground beetles that are natural pest predators. Removing those predators leaves the garden more vulnerable to the next pest wave, not less. Which means that the more thoroughly you treat with synthetic pesticides, the more dependent on synthetic pesticides your garden tends to become. That is not a conspiracy. It is a system. Nobody had to coordinate it. It simply pays better to sell a product that leaves your garden needing more product than to teach you to build an environment that needs less. The borax system costs under $10 for the entire season. It does not need to be reapplied every 3 weeks on a synthetic decay schedule. And because it works partly by correcting a genuine mineral deficiency, and partly by establishing physical and chemical barriers rather than killing beneficial and harmful insects alike, it does not undermine its own effectiveness over time. The soil that is correctly mineralized at the beginning of the season is more resistant to pest pressure mid-season than it was in May. That is the direction a real food system moves, toward less intervention over time, not more. Here is what I want you to do this week. If you do not already have a box of 20 Mule Team Borax, go get one. A 65-ounce box at Walmart runs about $5. That box will cover everything I have described for an entire season, with powder left over for next year. Start with the bait stations. 1.5 tablespoons borax, 1 tablespoon sugar, 1 cup warm water. Soak cotton balls in this solution and place them at 6-foot intervals around the outside perimeter of your beds. Check them in 3 days, refresh them in 7. You will see results within 2 weeks if ant pressure is part of your problem. If you have soft-bodied insects on your plants right now, make the foliar spray this afternoon. 1 tablespoon borax per gallon of water. Spray the undersides of leaves in the early morning. Do not use this on beans or peas. Use it on tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash, brassicas. Get underneath the leaves where the aphids and mites actually live, not just on top where the water runs off. And take 15 minutes this weekend to check your garden for boron deficiency symptoms. Hollow broccoli stems, cupped or discolored young leaves, root vegetables with dark interior spots, squash with flowers that drop without setting fruit. If any of those are present, do the soil drench. 1 tablespoon per gallon per 100 square feet, once this season. Do not overdo this one. Write down what you used and where. A mineral correction is not a thing you eyeball twice and hope for the best. And finally, soak your tools. Not for sentiment, for the same reason my grandfather did it. A clean blade does not carry trouble from one plant to the next. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what pest has given you the most grief this season? Is it the ants that farm aphids on your peppers? Is it the squash bugs that show up every August like they have a calendar? Is it the cutworms that take your seedlings in the night so cleanly that by morning all you find is a collapsed stem and nothing attached to it? Tell me your zone and your main crop. I read every one of these, not to collect data, because after 30 years of farming this ground, I still learn things from what other gardeners are dealing with in their corner of the country. And sometimes the answer one gardener needs is something another gardener figured out in a totally different climate. That exchange of knowledge is what this channel is for. It does not happen in the garden center aisle. It does not happen on the label of a $30 bottle. It happens between people who grow food and care about what comes out of the ground. Next time, I want to talk about something that took me 20 years to fully understand, which is the relationship between the timing of when you pull fruit and how your plant responds to the season. Most gardeners pick when the fruit looks ready. There is a different way to think about that timing, one that the old-time growers here in Lancaster County knew, and it changes not just this harvest, but every harvest after it. I will show you the signs to look for and why getting the timing right can double your late season yield without changing anything else you do. I will see you there. My grandfather used to say that the land does not forget who treated it well. Keep treating yours well.